You can wait for that email from Catherine. We will also be recording this webinar tonight, but we can't see you guys, so the webinar will just be of us. So no worries there. We will be recording just so you are aware. I think that's it for logistics. I'll be keeping time as well, so you might be seeing me make some hand motions at these guys, but I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Allison.
Hi, my name's Allison Corcoran, and I'm an adult advisory librarian with Arapahoe Libraries.
I'm Bridget. I'm one of the teen services librarians with the Arapahoe Libraries. I was just saying what you said, Allison, but I think they all know now that we work at Arapahoe Libraries. Sorry, everyone.
Probably.
Catherine, go ahead.
Okay, yes. We're going in alphabetical order here, right? I'm Catherine. I'm one of the other teen librarians.
I'm Lauren Reed, another teen librarian, the final one.
And I'm Pamela Halloran, another adult advisory librarian with a focus on some book club books tonight.
Perfect. So I have my screen shared. You should be able to see the book party PowerPoint, and we'll be broadcasting the books up there as well. So if you can't see it, let me know, but we should be good to go. And we are going to get started with Allison first.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is a brand new book, but it's already at the top of bestseller list. It probably doesn't need any more promotion, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway because it really is great. It's the story of twin sisters born in a small Louisiana town that for decades has really prided themselves on how light-skinned all the African-American people are, and they marry that way and marry within the town. But the twin sisters decide to leave that town. And eventually one goes off and ends up passing as white, marries a white man, has white appearing children. The other one marries a very dark-skinned man, but eventually comes back to the town where her child is not very well accepted. It's really an amazing story about sisters. The twins lose touch with each other, but we still follow their lives through a couple of generations even, and about the impact their decisions make. What I love is the book takes turns you don't expect. Like, it's not always what you want. And the best part to me was not just the twins, but like the 10 other characters in the book. I would read a book about each one of them individually.
So the first book I'm going to talk about is a graphic novel. This is Abbott, and I really loved this. If you are looking for something that kind of blends together realistic with supernatural, this is set in 1970s in Detroit. The main character, her name's Elena Abbott, and she's a reporter for this newspaper. Sort of this hard-bitten, like gritty, sort of almost noir feel to the story, but it blends. There's a mystery, people are turning up dead, and there's an element of supernatural that gets sort of combined with the realistic portion of the book. And Elena's the one who is trying to figure out what's going on. The police are less interested. They think they've solved this crime. So what I really liked about this one, the art is fantastic. It is dark and it's a little bit unsettling, but the atmosphere is really wonderful. And then I like the blend of the crime drama with the supernatural. It touches on a lot of real life stuff. It talks about racism and it talks about police brutality, but it also talks about, monsters from the occult killing people. So it's one that I will give the warning, it's a little bit gritty and a little bit bloody, but it's really, really entertaining, and it stands alone as a graphic novel.
Okay, this is Wicked As You Wish by Rin Chupeco. If you are looking for something that will be a really great action-packed mythology mashup to follow up your Percy Jackson reading, I highly recommend this one. It's a lot of fun. Rin is a Filipino author, and she does an excellent job of bringing in a lot of Filipino mythology, as well as mixing in a lot of other like classic literature. There are definitely characters from Alice in Wonderland and all kinds of other different fairy tales throughout. The story starts off following Tala, who lives in a world that looks like ours, but they use spell magic instead of technology. And she is pretty unique because she is a magical null. So she basically voids out any magic around her, which is inconvenient when you live in a world that's driven by spells. People don't really like her. But at the beginning of the story, she and her family are put in charge of this character who is in essentially like their version of witness protection. He's Princess Alexi, and he's the Prince of Wonderland. And there's this war that has been raging for years in this other land. There's tons of action. It's a whole lot of fun. I highly recommend it. And if you like audiobooks, it's got an excellent one.
Awesome. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Every Reason We Shouldn't. And if you like Jenny Han, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, this one is a great one for you. It's a really sweet romance mixed with some sports as well. There's ice skating and roller derby and things like that. But Olivia, our main character, she's dreamed of becoming an Olympic ice skater. And she had a bummer review during one of her competitions that's kind of set her back a little. She's taking a step back. She's more focusing on working at her parents' ice rink, kind of teaching kids how to skate and things, until one day this guy Jonah moves into town and walks into the ice skating rink because he is training for the Olympics as well. And so she starts to think about the Olympics dream again and things. And as they start talking, they realize they have a bit more in common than just ice skating, and really hit it off, kind of where the romance kind of gets started with that one. But it is a fantastic read. I really enjoyed how lighthearted it was. And there's amazing Korean food that they eat and make and share together, and things like that. They're both biracial, so they have interesting stories of family history that they're sharing and things they're going through with that. But it's a fantastic summer read. I highly recommend it.
And this is my first book, Lisa Wingate's The Book of Lost Friends. I met Lisa at a conference 2 or 3 years ago now, right as her first big book, Before We Were Yours, was published, and there was nobody in line to get that book signed. But after Before We Were Yours, and now this one, The Book of Lost Friends, she will always have people in her signing line in the future. These are both great book club books based on his historical fiction books. I am happy to tell you that it is not World War II, but it is based on true events following the Civil War, when there was just a lot of upheaval, especially in the South. Newly freed slaves were looking for their people. Many of the citizens of the South were just wandering around looking for people. They would post lost friends notices in newspapers and try to hook back up with people that had been dispersed. So the first, it covers 1875, Louisiana, when 3 young women are searching for people that they've lost. And then also 1987, Louisiana, when a new teacher in a rural Louisiana school has discovered this story and shares it with her students, and it affects them. So it's a really fascinating, interesting book, The Book of Lost Friends.
So I'm going to talk about Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. As you can guess from the title, it is Gothic novel. It is also horror, and I never read horror, but this got such great reviews, so much buzz. I was like, okay, I can try it. I can be brave. And it terrified me. I probably won't read horror again, but I loved it. The main character, Naomi, is a rich socialite in Mexico City in 1950s, and she gets sent out to a remote estate because her cousin has married into a kind of strange family. She might be in physical and mental distress. And so Naomi goes out to this house. The house is haunted. The relatives are creepy inbred monsters. There's mushrooms that can kill you. But Nadia is amazing throughout the whole book, even while she's the one going about like the house is going to kill her or whatever. She's like, I think I'm going to wear my lavender tea dress today because I look so good in that. But even though she stays the kind of spoiled socialite, she is also the smart, logical, brave one who's going to save herself possibly in this terrifying but incredible book.
Sticking with horror, we're going to shift gears slightly to horror movies. The writer of this book, the author of this book, directs horror films as well. And what I really like about this book is it combines a bit of her story as a director, as someone who works on on horror and in Hollywood with the story of Millicent Patrick. So The Lady from the Black Lagoon is about Millicent Patrick, the woman who designed the creature from the Black Lagoon, the one in the title creature from the movie. And she's one of the only women to design and kind of craft one of the classic Hollywood monsters. And this book, the author in particular found out about Millicent Patrick's work and wanted to know more. And so this is her story of trying to figure out more, as well as her telling us Millicent's story. So not as scary as the book that Allison just talked about, right? But it does have, if you're interested in Hollywood monsters, if you're interested in that behind the scenes piece, this is really fascinating. And Millicent Patrick was one of the very first women who worked at Disney as an animator. So there's that part of her life. She grew up, her dad was one of the chief engineers on the Hearst Castle. And so there's all of these fascinating little insider glimpses. And it's the story of why we don't necessarily know who she is, what happened. So I really like it. And it's a lighter mixture of biography and memoir, I would call it. Really fun.
We will move away from the horror genre because I am a giant chicken. This is Clap When You Land, Elizabeth Acevedo's newest book. You may know her from The Poet X and With the Fire on High. Much like those books, I don't recommend you read it. I recommend you listen to it. That is really the only way to consume her books, is to listen, because they are all written in verse and she performs them, and they are beautifully done. And I think this one might be my favorite. It is a dual narrative story of two sisters who don't know that the other exists, until their father is killed in a plane crash. And they find out that he had two families in different countries, and he's been living this double life, and they are having to come to terms with the death of their father, as well as learning to accept the way that he left them, because one's in the Dominican Republic and her life has been very difficult. The other is in New York City and feels super betrayed by her father. And so it is just this beautiful story told these two sisters who are finding this family for the first time.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk about Slay next, and it's about Kira Johnson, and she's an honor student, math tutor, really popular at her school, and she's one of the only Black students at her school as well. But when she gets home, she kind of shifts. She joins thousands of Black gamers online, and this online kind of invite-only multiplayer game called Slay. And most of Slay is built around Black history. There's different battles, challenges. You can hang out with your friends there. It kind of has a feeling of like just unity and being able to hang out in the space together. And the biggest secret of all, and you find out as the reader early on, is that Kira's actually the creator of Slay. She's put so much time, energy, and effort into it, but she doesn't want anyone to know. It's like her secret, it's her baby. She wants to keep protected. And especially when there's a teen that is killed in Kansas City in real life over a dispute that happened in Slay, she is really challenged to try to come out and say who she is, because now there's talks of charging the creator for anti-white discrimination, and so there's lots of conversation about that. But she is battling between protecting this space she's created for everyone, her identity and everything else, but also sticking up for it. I love her passion, how she creates this game, and the history that is involved in it. It is very good, very strong, very powerful story. So that is Slay.
Okay, Codename Hélène by Ariel Lawhon. Ariel's previous book was I Was Anastasia, about the supposed surviving Romanov daughter. This book is also about an actual woman, a historic woman, and it takes place mostly during World War II. So there you go. Those of you who still love the World War II books, of which there's so many, and some of them are really good. This one was wonderful. It's based on a woman named Nancy Wake, who was Australian. She was a reporter. She then, as the war was starting, she became a spy for England, for Britain, and spent a lot of time in France, where she married Henri, a Frenchman. So it includes, she was a very brave woman. Of course, it's very exciting her adventures, what she did to try to help the Allies, tragedy, friendship. She was, as I said, she was very brave. It's ultimately really the story of their marriage, Hélène and Henri's marriage. And I just found it so exhilarating. I just really didn't want it to end. And I wish I could meet Hélène. And she wears red lipstick. So that's codename Hélène.
Okay, I'm going to talk about The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, most famous for the book and then the movie Room. Now, I know you're thinking, you know what I really could use right now to help me relax is a book about a pandemic that also features really gory obstetrical details. But you need this book. It's set in Dublin in a hospital during the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. The main character is a nurse on a maternity ward, specifically the ward where the women have the Spanish flu and are pregnant. The whole book takes place in like 3 days on that ward and has the most amazing characters. I was pulled in completely. I loved that it was pandemic fiction, which was a surprise to me. This book wasn't supposed to come out till 2021, but the publisher bumped it up because they knew it would be popular at this time. Especially, it was fun to read about how they were dealing with the pandemic in Ireland at that time. There are all these cute posters up all over the place, like eat an onion a day, keep illness away. And one we still need now, cover up each cough and sneeze, fools and traitors spread disease. It's like, well, there was the pandemic in 1918. An amazing book, and I'm sure it'll be huge.
This is much lighter than pandemic literature. This is a really fun sort of romance, sort of realistic story about a teenager. If you like The Hate U Give and you're looking for more stories that deal with the central themes of that book, but you would like a book where no one dies, that's this one. It deals with a lot of the same story, like issues, conversations around race and about friendship and about identity. The main character, Lou, she is a senior, I believe. She's like going to be a senior, and her younger brother, she lives in this town in Kansas, and her younger brother is trying out for the play. They're going to do the Wizard of Oz, the school play, and he gets cast. And and Lou and her brother, they're Native American, and there are a few other students cast because the new theater person, director, teacher, is doing colorblind casting for the first time, and there's a lot of pushback from the community around this. And this is sort of the story of the play, but also the story of Lou and her new boyfriend, and then what it's like for her and her family kind of going through this. It's funny. It has the theater kid, if you're into like the theater kid, drama kid stuff, it's got some of that. And it's one that is, I would say, much lighter than the book that Allison just book talked. Not that that one isn't awesome, but if you're looking for something a little less heartrending, this one might be for you.
Going back to heartrending, this is The Silence of Bones by June Her. And I picked this one up really not knowing anything at all about what it was about. I do that pretty frequently, and then I just jump right in and figure out what I'm listening to. I listen to most of my books. This is historical fiction set in 1800 in Korea, which I know almost nothing about historically. But this is right around the time that Christianity and particularly Catholicism were really gaining a foothold in the country. And it follows Sol. She is an indentured servant who works with the police. At this time, it was illegal for the male police force to investigate and like search the homes and search the bodies and do autopsies on women. So they used these female indentured servants to do that. And so that's June's job, or not June, that's the author, Sol's job. She goes into the apartments. She does the body searches of the murder victims. And so it's really fascinating. So it's a mix of like true crime, and I learned so much about historical Korea at that time. And it's just this really fascinating story that it starts off, they're investigating a murder of a very highborn woman who is suspected of having recently converted to Catholicism.
So the next one I'm talking about is Warden of Eternity. And this one is a really good fantasy Egyptian mythology with alternative World War II history mixed in case that wasn't enough. So it is quite the mix. I would say like Rick Riordan with a twist, because it does go into a lot of mythology, which I didn't know anything about Egyptian mythology. So you have Zeva, and she is 15. She's living in New York, trying to make ends meet by herself. And the last thing she was told by her parents before they had to leave is that you have a great and terrible destiny. And it's like, what do you do with that? So she's trying to make ends meet, trying to figure that out. And then one day she sees a large shadowy figure following her, and it kind of eggs her on it and starts a fight. And what happens is she has more power and force than she knows what to do with. Like, she thinks she's going to run, but she doesn't. And next thing she notices, she's not alone. There's other people helping in this fight that she's never seen before. And it gets really fast paced from there. She learns that she's actually a descendant of Egyptian royalty and has ancient magic kind of mixed in with her past. And so she's learning throughout her whole journey. It throws her in this high speed, going to Egypt, figuring it all out, and figuring out who her family is. I really loved the Egyptian mythology. But then when she gets to Egypt, that's where the alternative history is. Hitler is in full reign there, taking over, and is kind of figuring out what is happening in Egypt. That there's a rumor to be something like unearthing kind of the gods that have been quieted for years. So it's a really good, really intense, fast-paced story that I highly recommend. It's fantastic.
Deacon King Kong by James McBride. James McBride wrote The Color of Water about his white Polish mother, and he won the 2013 National Book Award for Fiction for Good Lord Bird. This is his latest. I really enjoyed his writing. It's not very long, but by the end, you will know the characters so well, and you won't want it to end. You'll just want to see what else is going to happen. It's part of a mystery, part of sort of slice of life. It takes place in 1969 in a project in South Brooklyn. The deacon, an older black gentleman called Sportcoat, walks up one day and shoots the local drug dealer, the young man who's the local drug dealer. And so the rest of the book kind of unravels why he did that. King Kong is the hooch that lubricates many of these people's lives and actions, many of the characters. McBride is so warm and heartfelt with his characters. You'll just really enjoy them. As I said, you'll learn them. It's just really sneakily brilliant the way he ties together everything that happened in this very short period of time. So I recommend Deacon King Kong.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about The Last Flight by Julie Clark. This is a thriller that's a big bestseller this summer. It's the story of two women. One of them, Claire, has married into a wealthy, very powerful political family, but her husband is horribly abusive, and she is plotting how she can get away from him when he has every connection in the world. And then the other is a younger woman, Eva, who is in some kind of horrific situation, but we don't know what it is. That goes unstated. And she is also trying to escape to a new life. And they meet up at the airport, past security where you show your ID, and decide to switch tickets. So they get on different flights to further complicate their plans of escaping from their lives. And one of the planes crashes. So who is on that plane, and were they in the assigned seat they were in, and lots of questions about that. The other woman has to go and pretend to live the life of the first one. What I liked about this is so much psychological thriller stuff. The characters are unlikable, they're unreliable, you don't know who to trust. You really like Claire and Eva, and you're pulling for them. And so that just made it even twistier and harder, but not too terrifying.
So Gideon the Ninth is this was one of my favorite books that I have read recently, and the reason I'm book talking it is because the sequel, Harrow the Ninth, is coming like in like a week or so. So please, I highly recommend you read this. If you like necromancers, and who doesn't like necromancers? I'm sure someone doesn't, but you should. And this is the story. It's sort of like a locked room murder mystery set with lesbian necromancers in space. You can see all of the skeletons getting beaten up and sorted to death. I guess they're already dead because they're skeletons. But this is like an extremely kind of funny, gory, I would call it deeply emotionally compromising story, despite what I have just said about all of the action. It blends together. It does a lot of things really well, very twisty, and it blends together these action moments with these really emotional moments and some very sharp and witty humor. It is a really good time. It ends with an ending that left me desperately wanting the sequel, and it's almost here. So 10/10 recommend. You should give this a try.
You get a gold star for staying under a minute.
Okay.
I love it so much.
So we'll move from necromancers in space to hamster mercenaries. This is The Underfoot, The Mighty Deep by Ben Fisher. It is a graphic novel. It's a YA graphic novel. If you like animal stories, this is a post-apocalyptic animal story. The in-between chapters, it kind of alludes to the collapse of humanity and how these animals became sentient. They were test animals experimented on, and they broke out of their testing facility. But the main storyline follows the hamster aquatic mercenaries, or hams, and they are on a mission. They've just been hired to go and save the badger den, which is under threat from the new beaver dam is going to flood. It's a lot grittier than it actually sounds. That sounds like a very cute story. It's not necessarily cute. The like bad guys in this story are snakes. So my warning is, if snakes bother you, they're illustrated in the story. But you also, I know my picture is really small, so you can't see it, but you also get these little ID cards that tell you about the various hamsters in the story, and they are hysterical. They're such great characters.
Awesome. So we're going to hop back to horror with Bone Houses. It's a horror zombie fantasy kind of mix, and it's about Rin. And she lives in Colburn with her family. She's recently taken on her family job, which is grave digger of all jobs. And in Colburn, it's a little bit different to be a grave digger there, because the dead don't always stay buried. And so part of your job is to go out into the forest and kind of maintain what they call bone houses, which essentially are like zombies. And as Rin is doing that, she's noticed there's more and more coming around and getting closer and closer. And she's not really sure what's happening. And one day she runs into a stranger, Ellis, and he's a map maker. And from there, they start talking about old legends, because the map that he has is different. It's different than other maps. And so it really is fascinating what they dive into and what they see in the forest. I really enjoyed the twists and turns, especially once they got in there and started talking about the legends and things. It really kept me on my toes and reading more. Like, I had to know what was going on because it was so fascinating. So that's The Bone Houses.
And here is my hidden book club gem. I'm always on the lookout for book club books that are not the big book club books. This one is a little older. It was published in 2017, and it is my nonfiction offering. I had to find some books for book clubs when we couldn't get hold of books. And I stumbled on this one in our Hoopla service, so anybody can borrow it. My nonfiction book club had a fantastic discussion about it. The author, Lydia Reeder, is a relative of Coach Sam Babb, who in the 1930s offered scholarships to women to attend the Oklahoma Presbyterian College. So he recruited local women to come to college and play basketball. So the story, we follow some of the women, as you can see on the front of the cover, some of their stories. Many of them were the first to go to college. Some of them were Native Americans from Oklahoma. And it's also set against the background of the beginning of women's college sports. It may not surprise you that not everybody thought women should play basketball or wear shorts. That is The Dust Bowl Girls by Lydia Reeder.
Okay, I am going to talk, the nonfiction book I'm going to talk about is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. She was the winner of the Pulitzer Prize for The Warmth of Other Suns, and this book is scheduled to come out on August 11th. She has spent many years researching the topic of caste systems in India, in Nazi Germany, and then also in the United States. We tend to think of our divides as being more racial, but her premise is that it really functions as a kind of caste system. And what does that mean? And so the book varies from being very research-based to also individual stories of people and how this has affected their lives and how it still affects today. For instance, there's a section on the effect of a caste system like this on chronic health issues, and then what chronic health issues can do when there's other medical needs. And I think we're seeing all that right now. I mean, it's just ridiculous to call this book timely, but because it's just beyond timely, but she has been working on it for many years, but I think it'll be a really big book when it comes out this August.
I also have nonfiction. So She Came to Slay is when we have it in our adult collection, but it's one that I think would work really well for a teenage reader as well. And it's about Harriet Tubman. And one of the things that I loved about it, I feel like I knew some stuff about Harriet Tubman before this. I felt like I knew a lot of her life story, but reading this book, apparently I missed a good bunch of her life story, whether I missed it because I didn't pay attention in school or we weren't taught it in school, I'm not sure. But what I think works so well about this book is the writing style is extremely compelling, a little bit conversational almost, and it makes the story feel like you are not, it kind of tears down the wall between you and this towering historical figure. I feel like sometimes with certain people in history, they feel very separate, very disparate because of how much they've done or how big they stand amongst their peers at the time of how much we know about them. And one of the things that I particularly liked about this is that it kind of cuts through those layers and shows you kind of what feels like the real person behind the stories. There's also, you can tell from the cover, some wonderful art. This is illustrated by this artist, and the art is fantastic. And I really like the way it gives you this glimpse into the person behind all of the stories. So 10/10 recommend, and as I mentioned, it's something that I think works for readers of all ages.
My last book is The Henna Wars by Adiba Jagudar, and I apologize if I've mangled her last name. This is an own voices book, so it reflects the author's actual life. It is fiction. It is about a young Bangladeshi immigrant who is Muslim, and she and her family have immigrated to Ireland. And so really what the author wanted to do was tell the story of what it's like to be a queer Muslim woman who is also an immigrant. And so the story does talk about a lot of that and some of the difficulties that she faces, but it's all wrapped up in a romantic comedy. So it's also a really fun romance as the main character, Nushat, is exploring her interest in the new girl who has moved back to her town. I really loved this story. I loved how light it was while still dealing with some really serious issues. And it's a great story. My main caveat with this one, and I almost always recommend listening to the audiobook for books. Don't listen to the audiobook for this one. I didn't actually enjoy the audio. I loved the book, but the audio was not great because it's set in Ireland. Most of the characters are Irish and the narrator uses an American accent throughout. And it just pulled me right out of the story quite often. So just be aware of that if you're looking for it.
Last one I'm talking about is a graphic novel called Hat Haven, and I really enjoyed the artwork. It really sucks you in. That's why I wanted to have another page on here as well. But it's about Alex, and her family is very superstitious, like walking under ladders, black cats, all the things you could think of. All about like the clovers and things like that, 4-leaf clovers, very much superstitious, to the point that when her mom well, she steps on a crack and her mom's back literally breaks. She is really worried because she knows that it's in her hands to fix this. She has to help her mom come back from this. And that's when Hubbub, I don't know if you can see the little guy on her shoulder. It's a little leprechaun that comes and is going to help her figure out where Hap Haven is. Because Hap Haven is where the Jinx live. It's kind of where all of the bad juju, as they call it, and part of it lives and things like that. And so they're trying to figure out how to get there, how to kind of make everything okay with her mom. I really enjoyed the creativity, and it really made me think about good luck being random, or is it given from somewhere? Like it gets you really into that mind space of that this is somewhere, this is actually happening. So it's super fun, and I highly recommend it. The artwork is fantastic. That's Hap Haven.
This is a book for if you like characters and you don't care that there's not a whole lot happening. This is not a thriller page turner, but it's just a lovely story of two women, Old Lovegood Girls by Gail Godwin. It starts in 1958 at the Lovegood Junior College for Girls. And Farron Hood and Mary Jellicoe are matched up as roommates. They really don't have very much in common, but they develop quite a friendship. Unfortunately, Mary has to drop out of school. So about 10 years later, Farron looks her up. Farron renews their acquaintance. And so then the book goes on from there of what has happened in both of their lives. And you really get to know these two women as they pursue their lives and their path. So it's really about the bonds of a deep friendship, how it can affect you even when you're not in that much close communication with people, how much it influences you. And of course, Gail Godwin is a wonderful writer, so you will know these women through and through and really feel their whole life story. Tanya, am I done? I have one more book. Can I do another book? Yay! I snuck in another book because I feel like we need some kind of calming, heartwarming book maybe at this time. Phaedra Patrick, The Secrets of Love Story Bridge. She wrote The Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper, which was also a very feel-good, lovely story. So in this one, Mitchell's wife has died. He's caring for his daughter very carefully, very controlling her. He works on a bridge where people hang the padlocks as memories of their loved ones who have died. So his job is to take them off the bridge because they just keep going on the bridge. And one day while he's working, a young woman falls off the bridge and he jumps in to save her. And so that is the beginning of Mitchell's opening up and his new path and new course in life. And so it's just a lovely feel-good story. So that's The Secrets of Love Story Bridge.
All right, I think that is it. Thank you all for coming tonight. We will be trying to do this monthly through the end of the year. No promises, but we're hoping. So look for the events on the Arapahoe Library page and sign up. It will be different book talkers every month for the most part. We'll be switching kind of in and out. And you will be emailed that list of books that we talked about tonight. Did I miss anything, friends, that we wanted?
I think the next one is August 18th, Tuesday evening. So,
and I think it should already be up on the website. So.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming this evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Have a good evening.
Bye.